more focused on appearance. Right, we're going to make a start, everybody, if that's okay, because we've been joined by numbers, but we're up against the sunshine as well. So good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for attending what's now our third virtual meeting of Coventry Warwickshire Champions. Today we have 125 people registered from across our patch, so thank you all for taking the time. It's encouraging numbers, especially considering it's holiday time and the weather is so fantastic. If you're in work, that's great because you've got air conditioning presumably. If you're not and you're perspiring in your front rooms, we do appreciate the commitment. Thank you. My name's Adam Dent from Advent Communications. We're a PR firm based in Coventry and working when conditions allow right across the UK and sometimes abroad. As most of you will know, these Champions events are to keep you across all things that are happening in Coventry and Warwickshire, but we also like to hear from those who hail from or have strong connections with our area. I know there's a large number of you joining us for the first time, so thank you again for that. If you'd like to learn more about Coventry and Warwickshire Champions, please do contact Nick Erskine online. Nick is on this session and his details are available on the Champions website. Our hashtag today, as you can see probably above my head to the right, maybe to the left as you're looking, is Champs August. So please do tweet away. We're going to hear today from 4 people, all with interesting stories to tell. Our first speaker is a national figure who hails from the north of our patch. Our second speaker formulated an idea through her own personal hardship in Coventry and is now on a national stage, while 2 of our most eminent business figures will give their feedback on our current commercial state as hopefully we begin to emerge from the curse of COVID. So thank you once again for being here today. Right, firstly I'm going to speak to Dame Judith Hackitt, whose journey to becoming one of the most respected industry voices in the country began in North Warwickshire. Dame Judith is the chair of Make UK, which champions engineering and manufacturers in the UK, and a director of the High Value Manufacturing Catapult, which has 2 centres on our patch at WMG and the MTC, and also is a non-exec director of HS2. She recently had responsibility for the review into building safety after the Grenfell fire tragedy. And at the time of her appointment, she was described by the Sunday Times as a no-nonsense engineer. Judith, welcome. Is that a fair description? I think you're on, there we go. Is that a fair description, a no-nonsense engineer?
I think so. I think so. Yes. Yes. I guess I have a reputation for saying what I think most of the time.
Oh dear. Right. Well, be kind. So I alluded to it or mentioned it right at the start that, I mean, I first spotted that you were from this area in that Sunday Times article. So explain whereabouts you're from in Warwickshire, a little bit about your family background and your connection with this area.
Okay, so I grew up in, as you said, North Warwickshire. So my home was in Dordon, right on the borders between Warwickshire and Staffordshire. And I went to school in Atherstone. I went to the grammar school in Atherstone.
And the family background, were they always from there? What was the reason that they were?
Oh yes. So both of my grandfathers were coal miners in the North Warwickshire coal mines, and my dad was also an engineer, a mechanical engineer, but he did it what I regard as the hard way, in that he didn't go to university. He did his night school training whilst apprenticed in Coventry.
And do you know where he worked?
He worked for Alfred Herbert's.
Right, yes, the biggest in the world at that.
Yeah.
So from that sort of, as you were saying, from him going through college, were you the first in your family to go to university?
Yes, I was. Yeah.
And had that academic thing always appealed at school? What were your sort of strengths at school?
My strengths were maths and science, and still are, I guess. I always found it fascinating, the whole scientific stuff, and the more I did the practical stuff, the more interested I became in that. It never occurred to me then, though, that I was going to follow the career path I've eventually turned out following, in as much as when I was at school, I always thought I would become a teacher. So even when I went to university to study chemical engineering, which lots of people told me I was crazy in 1972 to be thinking about becoming an engineer, but I did anyway. But even then, my main reason for doing that was that I felt it was important, if I was going to teach science and maths, to be able to put that into context. And so my big plan, as it were, was to go to university, get a degree, spend a couple of years in industry, and then take up teaching, because I'd then be able to provide the context. What happened, of course, was that I went into industry, absolutely loved it, and never left. So the teaching plan took a back seat.
Yes, it's funny the decisions one takes. So what, Imperial College?
Yeah.
What was like that, particularly for a female student in the 19th? Vastly different to now, I would presume.
Oh, well, Imperial College is very different now from what it was then. So, I mean, now it's a university in its own right. When I was there in the 70s, it was it was still part of the University of London. There were 4,000 of us on campus at Imperial. And now it's like 20,000, because it includes the medical school. And of those 4,000, 400 of us were female. So that probably gives you a sense of what it was like, really. Most days in my first year, someone said to me, what makes a girl do chemical engineering? And you had to think up answers to that question every day. I hope people have stopped asking those sort of questions now, but who knows?
But I mean, the preeminent place certainly in the UK to do what you studied.
Yes, I thought so. Yes, yeah.
And then when you left, you say that how far into that? Well, explain where you went to when you left. You joined Exon, didn't you? What was the appeal?
Yeah, I did. I applied to several places. Well, what I should say, I guess, is that I said that my dad worked at Alfred Herbert's, but I worked in Coventry for a while during my vacations. I worked for Courtaulds in Coventry when I was at university. But then when I applied for jobs, I applied to a whole range of different big chemical companies. ICI, as was then, Shell, BP, and I applied to Esso, now Exxon, and went down to Southampton, and really thought that combination of being able to work as a chemical engineer and live on the south coast was a great opportunity. So that's where I went, and I worked for them for the first 15 years of my career.
I was going to say, because you've had a career that spanned a lot of different sort of places and representation bodies, but you stayed there for quite a long time. Was that just because you were happy, you were progressing?
Absolutely, and being very well trained, I hasten to add. I often say to people that some of the best training I had that set me in good stead for the rest of my career happened when I was with Esso, not least of which was that embedding of a real sense of how important safety is. I think that's where that realization first came about during the very responsible roles I had in Exxon, looking after high hazard facilities where, you know, you really did. This was not just about stopping people from slips, trips and falls. This really was about, yes, we cannot possibly afford to have a leak of that toxic chemical. We cannot have an explosion. You know, it was real in-depth safety embedded in everything that we did.
And it was an industry that had its problems on that front in the past, wasn't it? In the recent.
Of course. So when I was at university, so I was at university from 72 to 75, and I doubt that there are many people on this call who can remember that in 1974 we had a massive explosion here in the UK at Flixborough at a chemical works, and I think for me as a student that was that first real shocking realization of just what harm can be caused in safety incidents. So, you know, when I look at events like what's happened in the last week in Lebanon, and the extent of yet another ammonium nitrate explosion. It really does make me sad that we still don't seem to have learned all of the lessons that are very clear and there for the taking, but still we keep seeing these things happen from time to time.
Because as is inevitable nowadays, that unfolded on social media. Did you realise straight away what it was with your expertise? Did you realise it was a chemical explosion?
Well, we have some interesting conversations in this house, because one of the things I haven't told you is that I also married a chemical engineer, someone I met at university. So when we saw those videos on TV last week, we both looked at one another and said, that could be another ammonium nitrate incident. And the reason that was so so front and center for me was that when I became president of the Institution of Chemical Engineers in 2013, in the speech I gave when I became president, I used the example of the whole litany of ammonium nitrate incidents that had happened over the last century as examples. So to see yet another one really, really is sad.
And you say stayed at Exxon for 15 years. You didn't straight away go into representation and lobbying, did you? You went to...
No, I left Exxon in 1989 and went to work for a UK specialty chemical business. And I was with them for nearly 8 years. So I moved from hydrocarbon chemicals, petrochemicals with Exxon to inorganic chemistry, making pigments and dyes. And that move was made in part for personal reasons, not that I wanted to leave Exxon, but because at the time we had 2 small children, 2 daughters, and for me to have stayed with Exxon in those days would have meant having to travel the world. And whilst that sounds attractive in some ways, when you've got a 2-year-old and a 1-year-old, it's not so easy to contemplate and manage, certainly back in those days.
And then, so what spawned the reason? Why did you move? Because obviously that's industry and very much industry, but then you went to chemistry for Europe. Why the move into a sort of non-industrial, a sort of representation?
Okay, so the first move was to the Chemical Industries Association, which is a UK trade body for the chemical industry. That came about because by the mid-1990s, one of the things that I was getting quite concerned about was that the industry I'd chosen to spend my career in was getting some pretty awful press, particularly around environmental damage, and, you know, all chemicals are nasty, all chemicals are bad. And what I saw, my view, was that the industry was not doing a very good job of making its case. And so when I saw the opportunity to join the CIA, I did that, and that it was really with that desire to become an advocate for the industry and to speak up for the good that the industry does, because I just didn't feel like it was getting its act together in terms of doing that.
And did it? Has it?
I think it's a lot better, and I think we do have we do have a better sense of that balance. I think it's fair to say that some of the bad press at the time was in some respects because of the industry's own inability to make the right case. You know, so if people are asking you and are expressing a concern that says, I'm really worried about the damage that chemicals are doing to the environment, and can you assure me that my children are not being damaged by these chemicals? If the industry response, as it was then, was, we are a very safe industry, we have lost time accident frequency rates of 0.01, and so we're safe, that's not the right answer, because that's not answering the question. So I think the industry's had to learn a lot about how to communicate and how to listen and respond to the questions they are truly being asked, rather than simply trying to reassure people that they know best. So it wasn't all pushing new messages. It was very much about teaching an industry that it needed to listen more and respond more effectively.
And when you made the move to EEF, now Make UK, was that industry in the same need? Is that what attracted you there? Was engineering not selling its case well enough?
No, I don't think so. No, I don't think so. I mean, the bit you've missed out was that after I left the world of chemicals, having been to Brussels to do a similar role for the European chemical industry for a couple of years, when I came back to the UK in 2007, I became the chair of the Health and Safety Executive. That was very definitely a point at which that body was really, really struggling with its reputation. So if you think back to around about that time, that was a time when what I saw as a very effective, very good regulatory body was getting some very unfair press coverage along the lines of health and safety. You know, health and safety stops you doing this, stops you playing conkers, stops you having hanging baskets on the lamppost, and all of that nonsense that was being used to put down the importance of health and safety. So it was very definitely a move into HSE based upon, I want to become champion and public advocate for this regulator who does a good job and for whom I absolutely believe in the cause about ensuring that people don't come to harm in the workplace. The move to EEF was slightly different in that by then I was already on the board of HVMC. I'm also a fellow of the Royal Academy of Engineering, and that engineering and manufacturing has always been at my core, I guess. So I'd got to know EEF pretty well while I was at CIA. So when Martin Temple was chief executive of EEF and I was at CIA, we became pretty good friends. I used to see him in meetings and so on. So when I realised that he was moving on as chair of EEF at the same time as I was stepping down from HSE, it just felt like a really good opportunity to become part of and chair an organisation that I have a lot of time for and always had held in pretty high regard in terms of its advocacy and its level of influence as government.
We've mentioned MTC and WMG. It's also, an industry that plays a huge part in this wider region, isn't it? I mean, it is key to our economy.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. The Midlands is the heart of the UK's manufacturing industry, always has been, and I think the work that WMG and MTC and other parts of the Catapult are doing in terms of reinventing and reinvigorating that around modern digital manufacturing is fantastic, and it's so exciting. I never ever, and one of the things I've missed in the last 6 months has been the opportunity to get out and visit and look at things, because visits to WMG and MTC are always, every time I go, there's something new to see, and it's fantastic.
And at the moment, if we just pause, if you take a litmus test of where we are now in manufacturing engineering, and we've got a question actually about Brexit, but with COVID and Brexit, how is the sort of state of the industry at the moment in terms of what you're having to do at Make UK and where we stand?
Well, it's interesting, and I think my time with EEF Make UK will be marked as being that period of Brexit, really. So I became the chair in March 2016. We were heading into the referendum. I don't think any of us believed we were going to vote to leave. We thought it might be close, but I don't think any of us in the organisation really thought the decision would go the way it was going to go. We were being very careful to represent the views of our members because it wasn't clear cut, and we were always assiduous in terms of making that clear to government at the time, that it wasn't clear cut, but that the majority of our members wanted us to remain. Fix the problems with the EU, yes, but from a remain position. So from that first real surprise of the country voting to leave, then working through what that meant, sitting through the various phases of the discussions about what that meant, deal, no deal, and all of the political uncertainty and so on, has really dominated my time with EEF Make UK. So that I think is, and it continues, and I think where we are right now is that the end date of this transition period is fast approaching. The difficulty I see is that we're all still very preoccupied with COVID, of course. But equally, I think what COVID has done is that it has really made us all focus on what we can do and what's important. And I think it will be an important factor for many years to come, because I think one of the lessons we have learned from COVID, which is interesting given that we are about to leave Europe, I think, is just how important UK manufacturing is, and that fragility of supply chains is a huge, huge issue, and that our resilience as a country has been found wanting in the last 6 months because we have not had those resilient supply chains. And there are, whether it's PPE, whether it's ventilators, or many, many other things, food manufacture, all of those things, it's absolutely clear that we've got to take a long, hard look at ourselves and put much, much more emphasis on the need for UK manufacturing for sovereign capability.
We've had a couple of questions actually. I'll do them in reverse order. Tom Mongan has kindly emailed. He's the Vice President of the Coventry Warwickshire Chamber and Chair of the North Branch, saying, do you have any take on the current state of trade negotiations, and would you consider that we're vulnerable in manufacturing in the UK because most of our OEMs are foreign owned?
I don't think that foreign ownership is such a big issue. I think what will matter to all of those companies, whatever the status of their ownership is it's about confidence in the UK as a good place to do business. That doesn't, however, mean that I'm not as concerned as many of our members are about how close we are now to the end of the year and the urgency of getting some clarity around trade, because I think it is a big, big issue. Of course it is. And, you know, we've flip-flopped about from deal to no deal many times in the last 3 or 4 years. And it's still in the balance. And I think it's a really difficult time. And this next 6 to 12 months with COVID and getting used to being in that new position vis-a-vis Europe is going to be a really, really challenging time. But what I am is absolutely confident that we'll get through it, because I think we are, and we have shown, I think, in the last 6 months that we have that resilience at a core level in our manufacturing businesses, and we will find our way through it.
Is it just, do you sense there is a massive activity going on behind the scenes, but the media quite understandably is preoccupied with COVID, that it's not getting, the trade negotiations are not getting the media they deserve, or is there not as much activity?
Yes.
I think it's that.
Yes, I think that's very much the case. Yeah.
I did think that last night when I watched News at 10, and the breaking news underneath was, I feel very sorry for him, but the actor Antonio Banderas had confirmed he got COVID. And I thought, well, that's really going to affect our lives in the UK, but there you go.
Yeah.
And what about when we leave Brexit? How will that affect Mike Ballinger's, our sort of health and safety standards and the integration with Europe? Will that affect us?
I don't think so. Not in any great, not to any great extent. I think there will be a point at which we will look hard at whether some of the regulations we have in place that we've inherited, as it were, from Europe, we need to have, but that will be at the margins. I think the very fact that we want to continue to trade with the rest of the world means that the standards that we maintain, not just in terms of product, but also in terms of working standards, which are part of the social compact, if you will. Yeah. If we do not maintain similar standards, they will become technical barriers to trade rather than hard barriers. And so I think there is every reason that we would want to maintain similar standards. In any case, I think you have to remember that in relation to health and safety law in particular, we've been a leader for many years. And much of what's been done in Europe, in all honesty, has been a levelling up with the standards that we already had in the UK.
So possibly after a long career, the thing that's thrust you into the headlines most has been the chairing the review of the building regulations on fire safety in the wake of Grenfell. Now, first of all, how did that come about? And secondly, can you just briefly, we've only got a couple of minutes left, can you sort of set for us the parameters of that? Because there have been other investigations, so where yours is different.
Yes, because people often refer to it incorrectly as a Grenfell review, and it wasn't. So the fire happened in June, 17th of June 2017. And I, like everyone else, looked on at what happened at Grenfell and said, I don't know how that's happened. I really don't know how that happened. And I can't believe that our building standards have allowed it to happen. I can't say I thought no more about it, because I was as troubled by what we were seeing unfold in front of us as anyone else. But then I went on holiday in July. I got a call from the then Secretary of State for Communities and Local Government, Sajid Javid, while I was on holiday, asking me if I would do a review of the regulatory system. What had happened in that 3 or 4 weeks between the fire and him calling me was that, first of all, the public inquiry had been set up. HSE and the police were doing an investigation, all very much focused on Grenfell. But there'd also been a lot of work done surveying other high-rise buildings. And basically, it had become clear to people very quickly after Grenfell that that wasn't a one-off. There were lots of other buildings where there was concern about the cladding, but there was also concern about other fire safety features of the buildings, including fire doors, fire stopping, sprinklers not working, a whole host of things. And so his call to me was, I want you to do a review of the regulatory system and tell me in less than 12 months what we need to do to change the regulatory system, because it clearly hasn't worked and hasn't delivered the quality that we were all assumed that we had. So that was the nature of my review.
And that was obviously 2 years, and the government have adopted all your recommendations in the fire safety bill, is that right?
They're in the process of. So the building safety bill was launched in draft 2 weeks ago. It will now make its way through the parliamentary system, and the first part of that in the remaining months of this year will be to go through a legislative scrutiny process, which both houses will be involved with, and then it will go through its formal readings next year. And that bill, coupled with some changes to the fire safety order, will indeed implement a new regulatory regime for high-rise buildings that will be very much modelled upon the approach that I had seen in industry to managing high hazards, because the tenet of my review said what we've failed to do is look at high-rise buildings as complex systems with lots of parts to them, not least of which are multiple residents. and that therefore it needs to be treated as a complex system, and that's what we will be doing in the new regulatory structure.
Did that, in your previous roles, I might be simplifying it, you may have chosen when you stepped into the limelight, when you step into an arena of the debate around Grenfell, did that make you a public figure whether you wanted it to or not? Because obviously, you know, you look at the reviews and she should have made this illegal, she should have banned that, she should have done that. You know, you were quite, do you just have to put your head down and plough on and not pander to what the media are asking, but actually stick to the parameters that are set out for you by the government?
Yes, you do. Yes, you do. And I think there's a really important point there, because I think today you have to do that no matter what you look at, because it's the problem is that the focus of media attention is so short. They want quick answers, and they want to be able to say, ban this, ban that, then we can forget about it. If we ban it, the fact of the matter is, as I said at the time, that material that was used at Grenfell should never have been there at all. And if you listen to what's coming out of the public inquiry now, at this late stage in the process, 3 years on, that's becoming clear that it should never have been put on there in the first place. So simply banning something might make people feel good, but it doesn't fix the problem. And I think the engineer in me says, you've got to get to the root cause, you've got to understand what's going on here, and you've got to fix the problem. And people might not want to hear that, especially if it's going to take some time. And we're doing all we can to pull out all the stops to get the new system in as quickly as possible. And it will be a lot quicker because of my review than it would have been had we have simply waited for the outcome of the public inquiry, which is going to go on for a long while yet.
We've run out of time. I just want to say, you said the engineer in you. I noticed a few years ago, I interviewed for a client of ours, Louise, who's going to be on a moment for the Chamber, for the CEO of Peugeot UK. And you never would have guessed he was French from the article until it got to the end and I asked him what his favourite gadget was. And he said it was the dehumidifier for his cigars, which I thought only a Frenchman could have said. But you're an engineer, but also a cook. And I see that your favourite gadget is your sous vide cooker. It is, indeed. Just very briefly, enlighten us on what, and is that half engineering and half culinary?
I've got lots of gadgets in my kitchen, but it's one of them. Yeah, well, sous vide is very easy, isn't it? So you're actually cooking meat at a much and other things at a much lower temperature, much more slowly, gently, in a bath of hot water, so that by the time it comes out, it's properly cooked, but it hasn't been subjected to the shock of high heat. So the meat that comes out of it is incredibly tender. And that's an engineering process, right?
Yes, I've got my answer. It permeates every bit of one's life, you see. Judith, thank you very much for joining us today.
My pleasure.
It's great that you've gone on to do what you do and you started your life and education in Coventry Warwickshire, and that's great for us. So thank you very much for responding. We really do appreciate it. And normally you'd be getting a round of applause now, and I'm sure it's happening in the businesses across Coventry Warwickshire. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you. Thanks.
Our next guest, Commodore, rather bizarrely kept me company in an early morning lockdown work session at my desk. That probably says a lot about work-life balance. I was listening to Wake Up to Money, which is on between 5 and 6 a.m., which featured a podcast on personal finance and was co-hosted by Keir. Impressed by what I was hearing, I did a bit of research and discovered to my joy, as I have to line up the speakers, that Keir was actually at that stage still a student at Coventry University. Now, most of us go through financial hardship at university, that's almost part of the gig, and Keir was no exception, other than she decided to help people in the same position and created Pennies to Pounds, a website and podcast giving advice, tips and promoting financial literacy. It's seen her now make appearances right across the media, work for top brands, and I hope clear that student's overdraft if that sort of thing still exists. Keir, welcome. Thank you for joining us this evening.
Thank you for having me.
So first of all, because you're not from this neck of the woods, why did you choose Coventry for your degree, first of all?
That's a really good question. So I went ahead from sixth form. I studied chemistry, biology, economics, and French. I was really good at languages, and I wanted to go ahead and carry on that at a higher stage. So I was looking around at different universities, and I knew I didn't want to be in London. I didn't want to stay in London, and Coventry had appealed to me. So none of my friends were going there, but I really wanted to go to Coventry. I went to go visit it. I love the area, so I picked Coventry. Not only that, but it also was really, really good for my course to do French and business. So that's why I picked Coventry.
And what other languages? It's one of those, everybody will know what I mean by this. It was one of those LinkedIn things I read and just ended up feeling about that small. Because which other languages do you speak?
So obviously I'm fluent in English, really good at French, did Spanish as well at university, and I also did Mandarin from sixth form on the side and partly in university as well.
You see, you left me when you said you were fluent in English. That was me straight away. And how did you, it's always interesting, people on this call are predominantly from the Coventry Warwickshire area. So it's always very interesting to hear the perspective of somebody who comes from outside. What were your experiences? Because you've now sort of graduated, I suppose, lockdowns.
Almost. I'm almost at the end, teaching at the end, but yes.
And what were your impressions and experiences of Coventry?
Coventry was completely different to London, completely different. Obviously, I'd been there to visit prior to me actually going to university, but living there was completely different. And I mean it in a good way, because London is so fast paced and everyone's always on the move. No one's got time to say hello to anyone. And then when I got to Coventry, I realized that, you actually can rest. You actually can slow down and take your time in Coventry. And I really, really did like it. Everyone was really nice in Coventry. I had a great 3 years when I lived up there.
And just explain then, when I said a bit of hardship, it's a familiar story, probably. I don't want to judge our fellow people on the Zoom call. It's probably an experience their children are now having. So explain what happened to you financially.
So for me, with my student finance, I wasn't able to get the necessary amount that I needed to cover my full rent and be able to live. So I got to that point where not only was I struggling for money to be able to survive at university, but also I was seeing my friends live a certain lifestyle, and I wanted to obviously follow suit because I didn't want to have to keep declining, going out. I wanted to actually join my friends. So I ended up applying for a credit card. I applied for one credit card and I didn't hear back from them for about 2 days. So I assumed that it didn't go through. So I applied for another credit card. Ended up, they both came back, both with a £1,000 limit. So that's £2,000. I got them both back. And instead of, even though I knew I should be savvy with my money.
You spent it all on textbooks, yeah?
Oh, absolutely. No, I ended up blowing a lot of it just being able to live a certain lifestyle at university, being able to go out and eat takeaway, all these things that don't really mean anything. But whilst you're in university, when everyone's doing it, you want to follow suit. So I racked up 2K worth of debt, aside from my student loan, that's not including student loan, where I realized that I had to now pay it back, because when you're younger, you just kind of think, this is my money, this is almost free money, I'm going to go and spend it, I'm not going to think about the repercussions about how to pay it back. And then when I actually got to that stage, I was like, wow, I need to get myself out of this debt.
Yeah, and then, but that's one thing doing that, but then how did the interest in helping others or stopping people fall into that same trap, how did that, we've all been debt, but we don't all do what you've done. How did that happen?
That's a fair point. So for me, I'd always had an interest in personal finance in general anyway. So once I got myself out of that situation, at university, I started up a YouTube channel. So that was with the intent of teaching and educating young people on personal finance. So I started that up. It did okay, didn't quite have the reach that I wanted it to have. So I kind of put that on pause. I knew that it was going to come one way or another. So I put that on pause in 2018. And then I was having conversations with my friends. A lot of them found themselves in debt for different reasons, much bigger than mine, 6K, major debt. So I was having a conversation with them, helping them out. And I realized if my friends are having these issues, the chances are that they're not alone. So there's probably a lot more young people out there who need this kind of education, and it's not there. When you go through secondary school, sixth form, university, we don't really get taught that. So then I decided I wanted to obviously try again. And it just so happened that last year, so October 2019, on Twitter, so I had less than 1,000 followers, not really many followers, and I made a thread on Help to Buy ISA. So that at the time was what the young people had if you wanted to save for your house, and that was closing to be replaced by the lifetime ISA, which we have now. But I knew that a lot of young people didn't quite understand it, so I made a thread explaining exactly what it is, how it works, and why young people should open it, and then decide later if you want to pick that or the lifetime ISA. That thread ended up going viral, and then from there was demand for more of my content, so I was creating more content. Then I push that all into the medium of a podcast. So I did that turnaround time for the podcast was about 7 days from that initial thread. That's when the Pennies to Pounds podcast started.
And where are you getting your information from? Because obviously it might be you know, one thing giving advice on sport or leisure,
Yeah.
giving advice on finances. So how do you, or how at that stage were you ensuring you were getting the right information, and where were you sourcing it from?
So obviously, like I said, I was still at university, so I was able to do my research at university. Like I said, I always had a keen interest in it anyway, so I was always following like the Financial Times, following all these places to make sure I'm up to date with information. And I'm sure everyone knows Martin Lewis, amazing hub for information. So all these combined, as well as obviously I have some knowledge myself, combining that, I'm always very keen on double checking and triple checking my information. So even though I may know the information, I want to double check that nothing's changed since then. So that's what I was doing, make sure that everything was correct. And then from there, that's how it all came about.
And then obviously I heard you on Radio 5.
Yes.
So how did the BBC contact you? What came?
Yeah, so yeah, they happened to find me from social media. So they found me from Twitter, and they wanted me to come on one morning, very early in the morning, I'm sure you know, for Wake Up to Money. But at the time, this was pre-COVID, so I actually went down to BBC Studios in Oxford Circus. So I went down there and I was on radio, which was amazing. Then I ended up going to BBC Radio London in the same week. So again, I was back on radio, back in the studio. And then from there, it just kind of became a regular occurrence. They'd call me about another finance topic. I'd come down and go on radio. So it was really, really good. Built rapport with quite a lot of the hosts, and it was really, really exciting.
And how's it developed? It's weekly now, the podcast?
As in my podcast, or? Yes.
Podcast.
Yes, so Pennies to Pounds is weekly. So since October 2019 up until present day, it's every single Monday I release it. So it's doing really, really well. It's helping a lot of young people, a lot more than I anticipated, which I'm really happy about. I was still very skeptical about the reach and the reception from young people, because I'm aiming, the target audience is 18 to 30, so I wasn't too sure how it would be received from that target audience, but everyone really, really enjoys it and is learning a lot from it, so I'm happy. And
is this the future Kia Commodore career? Can you monetize it?
Yes, I mean, well, right now I'm monetizing it at the moment, so I am doing that. Obviously, like I said, I'm still on the cusp of finishing university. So prior to Pennies to Pounds and everything taking off, I did have hopes of becoming a translator because I studied languages. So I thought I was going to leave university and just go straight into translation, maybe work for some banks and translate for them. That's what I thought I was going to do. And then obviously it's kind of turned on its head where I'm sort of working with banks to translate for them. I'm also working with banks to help create the financial content for young people, which is really cool. So right now, this is what my future is looking like. Hopefully I can keep building it and keep growing it. That's me right now.
And I mentioned top brands. I presume
yes.
Some of the, I've got to be careful what I say now, financial institutions that might be seen of a certain age are
yes.
very keen to get hold of you because you're a commodity that can talk to their younger customers where they've struggled to do that. Have you found that? And if so, do you have to fight to keep your independence so you're not seen as an arm of a big bank or conglomerate?
Yes, so if I answer the first part of your question, I have realised that a lot of these banks aren't able to communicate effectively to young people. For example, when I mentioned the thread that I made about Help to Buy ISA, there was a lot of young people who I had no idea, so they told me after the fact that they go into the banks wanting to open these ISAs up. The banks would give this whole spiel which made no sense to them, it's full of jargon, and they just pull out my thread and be like, this girl spoke about this is what I want because she makes sense. So then from there they obviously were like, who is this girl? We keep seeing people bring in this thread on Twitter, then they'd reach out to me. So that's kind of how that happened. I think a lot of banks are realizing that they're not addressing the young people. So I have been able to work with some huge brands like Monzo, Barclays, all kinds of brands to be able to create content for them. And you're right, it is hard to a certain extent to keep my independence because the moment you do recurring work with a brand, a lot of young people don't understand that you can create content for a brand and still be independent. So a lot of them link you as almost an employee for that company. I always have to try and say, no, I'm very much an independent brand, but I do help other brands create content tailored towards young people at times.
Brilliant. And just on a personal level, do you know what happens about collecting your degree and ceremonies and all that sort of thing?
I mean, at the moment, COVID is almost putting everyone on pause. So I know for Coventry anyway, lots of universities are doing it differently. Some people have got their degree sent in the post. Coventry have given us a choice to either A, get it in the post, or B, have it postponed until I believe January next year, possibly, hopefully, we can actually have our physical graduation. So I'm fingers crossed, that I will have my actual day and actually graduate. So that's where I'm at the moment. I just really hope we get to that point.
Well, Keir, that's been great. Thank you. I'm delighted I got up early that morning. That's been really fascinating. More power to your elbow, because, as you say, I'm talking about perhaps different generation, but certainly secondary schools, and certainly my children's schools, who are sort of they're 20 odd, didn't learn financial management at all at school. So you're A, all success to you, and B, you're providing a really good service. So thank you very much indeed for joining us as well.
Thank you so much.
No problem, Keir. Stay on if you want to, but we will not be offended if you go off. Don't worry. Not really nice to see you and speak to you again. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, as everybody knows, there's a lexicon of words and sayings which has been created out of and during 2020. I think you're on mute, which I now see is a T-shirt with Marks and Spencer's. COVID, lockdown, social distancing, air bridge, unprecedented times. But these really are unprecedented times. And during these, we've been helped to survive in business by a range of organisations, including the Coventry Warwickshire Chamber of Commerce and the Coventry Warwickshire LEP Growth Hub. We're joined in our double act spot this month by Louise Bennett, CEO of the Chamber of Commerce, and Craig Humphrey, MD of the Growth Hub, who you should see both of them on screen. Afternoon, Craig and Louise. Louise, I know quite a bit of this from personal contact, but just explain just how busy it's been for the Chamber, and just give us a taste of the support activities that your team have been undertaking, a lot of which is around communication.
Well, the first thing to say is that Craig and I will be very similar in answering these kind of questions. The workload, as it should be in any crisis, has been humongous. So I was looking at some of the stats earlier, and we had something like 1,200 individuals, unique individuals, all different, that went through events, seminars, advice clinics, support clinics, policy hours, you name it. You know, we've been out there with the Growth Hub delivering advice, information, guidance and support, because in those early days of COVID, it was all about that. It was all about taking the intel, taking the intelligence and the information that we've been given, and then translating it to make business sense, and then communicating it out to our wider business base. It has been very busy, but interesting.
Yeah, and there's been a great thirst for that information from your members. I mean, I've been on some of the policy hour sessions where you've had 50, 60 people on, and to be fair, the pull of the Chamber means that some of those decision makers and policy makers have been only too happy to appear. You've had some big names.
Yeah, the policy hours, invented by our policy lead, bless him, the policy hours have been a great success, because they're not only about giving information advice. This is where the Chamber can do something slightly different. It's given the businesses an opportunity to influence. So when we do policy hours, we're talking to ministers, members of Parliament, directors of public health, the police commissioner, and it's a great opportunity for our business leaders to actually influence their thinking in terms of the kind of support that should be out there for our businesses.
And Craig, likewise, your activity, one sort of main tenet of that has been your market reports looking at different sectors. And I know they've thrown up some information that has taken some of the decision makers by surprise. I mean, the one example that springs to mind to me was the sort of status of Stratford District, which everybody thinks is a affluent sort of part of the world, but it's been hit by COVID way above the national average, and that came out of a market report.
Yeah, absolutely, Adam. I mean, Louise is quite right that right at the beginning we thought that the position that we had to take was to get information out as quickly as possible. And if you remember, you know, government announcements were coming out thick and fast, but behind those announcements was all the detail that businesses needed. I mean, their revenue streams have been cut off overnight. So we took it upon ourselves to make sure that we got some real-time intelligence available every week from the start of lockdown, influenced by information from Make UK, from Chamber, from many, many partners. And what that did throw up, it threw up one or two things, as you said, Adam, that came as a surprise. One was areas like Stratford-on-Avon and Kenilworth, who had not been hit by unemployment before, suddenly faced with unemployment on a scale that they've probably never seen before, because it's shown us that the most vulnerable group are young people. and young people in our sub-region, we've seen unemployment claimant counts go up by 134%. What it's also shown us, of course, is the diversity and strength of our economy. So that those manufacturers that were able to diversify and to supply PPE equipment, for instance, we've seen a surge in the demand for that, and revenues up in some cases by more than 300%. So tourism, leisure, hospitality obviously has been adversely affected. But the Smart Region report shows, sheds a light on, you know, what the impact has been, and also what we need to do to aid the recovery.
And Louise, Craig touched on it there. Certainly, anecdotally, what I hear is that compared to other areas, we are exceptionally well joined up. Now, you know throughout the chamber network whether that would be true or not. Is it safe to say that is correct?
Absolutely. Coventry and Warwickshire, outstanding in terms of partnership working, partnership activity, connectivity. We were absolutely lined up together at the start of this crisis, whether you were UHCW, whether you were our local authorities, whether you were in this business support landscape that we were in. Yeah, at the starting line, all working together to try and get information and advice and guidance out there. It is an amazing partnership in Coventry and Warwickshire. We don't always agree, but what you will find is if we don't agree, we disagree behind closed doors. We don't come out publicly having a go at each other, because we know that it is in the best interests of the locality of Cov Warwickshire to stand together really as partners, and we do.
We mentioned, or Craig mentioned, about youth unemployment and youth retraining, and I know for many years, way before COVID, that's been a passion of yours. We've got Kickstarter and other initiatives from the government. How is this? What sort of legacy is this going to leave for this generation who are emerging into work now?
Frightening, really, in terms of being a young person coming out of college, university, and there is so much we are going to have to do to support those young people into work. Not many people might know, but Coventry Warwickshire Chamber, through our training division, we actually deliver apprenticeships, about 700 a year. And if I look at the quarter, April to June, where normally we would have engaged about 100 employers and delivered on 100 apprenticeships, this year, due to COVID-19, we just about scraped 20. So you can see that the apprenticeship market has been decimated for obvious reasons. And yes, we hear about some of the government's new schemes, such as Kickstarter, and I have my views on whether that will work as it is shaping up at the moment, or whether in fact, again, people like Craig and I have got much to do to still influence schemes like the Kickstarter scheme to make sure that they are really workable and relevant to local businesses.
Well, you say you have your views. I take it your views is, at the moment, it's not going to work how it's framed.
25-week placement, 25% funded by the government, all helpful. So that means that we're asking employers to put 75% of the wage up for employing that young person for that 25-week placement. It is targeted at the most vulnerable in our communities, as is programs such as traineeships. So that's good. But, you know, we've heard today, haven't we, 730,000 more people are no longer on the payroll in the UK economy today. So to go out and ask employers to be taking on people at this time, you know, forgive me, and there will be employers out there that are looking for people and skills, but it is not going to be an easy sell, not the Kickstarter scheme. But we will work with it, we will influence it, we will shape it, and we will make sure that it does the best by Cov Warwickshire.
And Craig, you got similar doubts about the furlough retention grant from what you've said as a testing out from opinion of manufacturers in particular.
Yeah, one of the surveys that we have conducted has showed that the kickstart that Louise has just alluded to, 90% said that they were not interested in using that because it wasn't long enough, and 100% of those that were surveyed said that the £1,000 incentive to keep furloughed staff on wouldn't change their thinking at all. But it did become quite apparent, Adam, very early on that cash and liquidity into the ecosystem was the thing that was needed, and we have seen in Coventry and Warwickshire, over £3 billion worth of support come into our ecosystem. Our job was to make businesses aware that that was available. Louise alluded to the fact that we are in a fortunate position that we can bend the ears of ministers. And a couple of areas that we are currently lobbying on is that cash is still absolutely critical to aid the recovery. Many businesses have been burning cash and they've not got that cash reserve to invest in recovery. So we're asking government whether loans that have been taken out under CBILS will not be paid back until that company becomes profitable. That's one angle. Or could the government write off a proportion of the debt? And the debt for SMEs has gone through the roof, understandably, over the last 6 months. Could government write off a proportion of that debt, provided that SME reinvest that in their own growth and recovery? And we're also beginning to see late payment re-emerge as a threat to the survival of businesses. So could government step in and provide some invoice factoring into the supply chain, where the supplier is paid right up front on day one, putting liquidity into the system?
Okay. And no, absolutely, and certainly those two last, Kickstart and the retention, which seem to be two of the latter ones, have been received largely as gimmicks. It seems to me. We've touched, Louise, on with Dame Judith on Brexit. Obviously, you had a Brexit club, or you've got a Brexit club. How are your members feeling about Brexit? Have they sort of had to shelve it because we've got COVID, or is it something looming in the background? How do you read it?
Yeah, and I was interested to listen to Dame Judith. She was absolutely spot on. Because of COVID, it has sort of taken a back seat, and in many ways taken a back seat possibly in government as well. But Brexit and you know, come January 2021 is going to be again a real critical thing for business, and for many businesses could even be another crisis point. So again, listening to Dame Judith and thinking about the numbers of manufacturers that we've got across the West Midlands, which is something like 300,000. Those 300,000 manufacturers, most of those, if not all, will be importers, exporters, because that's what manufacturing and engineering does. And so come Brexit, come leaving Europe and the transition and the introduction of new customs, new documentation, there's going to be a plethora of new initiatives, new programs, new things to do that potentially could become a burden on business again, unless people like us step in. And we're very proud at the Chamber. You know, we have a docs team. It's one of those markets that historically chambers of commerce all across the country have been into. We have a docs team. We'll be scaling up that team in terms of customs support. We have Brexit channel managers that work with our growth hubs. So yeah, come December, January, it may not be high on your business leaders' agendas at the moment, but if you're importing and exporting, it's about to get a bit crazy.
And can I ask you both, and Craig, if you want to go first, we keep reading, although I have to say it's quite ahead of this interview, I was researching at the weekend, and there was a page in the Sunday Times sort of saying that we don't think we are going to get a second wave, and I saw a Midlands Today report saying the same thing. But then you look at I think it was Chris Whitty's predecessor on the front of a tabloid saying we're in the grip of the start of a second wave. What is the advice for businesses if they get hit by staff with who might show some symptoms? I know you've been very, very joined up as two organisations along with others. What's the sort of main advice?
You're right, Adam. We have this dichotomy, don't we, between health and wealth. You know, we want to reopen businesses. I mean, Professor Whitty did say that he thought the economy had probably opened up as far as it could at this moment in time. So we need to make sure that the workplace is as safe as can be. And so if anybody senses that there may be any confirmed cases within their workplace, it's really important that we contact the local authorities who have a public health duty to manage an outbreak. And we've seen, haven't we, in places up and down the country, Preston and Leicester, where an outbreak has taken place and a lockdown happens very quickly. So all of that information is hosted on both the Chamber and the Growth Hub's websites. You can go on gov.uk and find out further information. But yeah, two routes. The two local authorities across Coventry and Warwickshire, being Warwickshire and Coventry City Council, have a raft of information around what to do around an outbreak. And similarly, there's lots of good information from Public Health England.
And I take it, Louise, you'd echo that. It's not worth, we've seen some cases in parts of the UK where employers perhaps haven't been as responsible as they should have been in terms of reporting cases immediately, and it's then affected the wider local economy. So if you see something, you've got to act, haven't you?
You have got to act, and generally, you know, as I talk to businesses across our patch, they are responsible, absolutely responsible, and they've all taken their COVID-19 safeguarding secure practices very, very seriously. Yeah, and as Craig said, we've got two fabulous public health departments at the county and the city, and if in doubt, just pick up the phone and speak to those departments, public health departments.
Now, obviously, on a personal scale, or personal level, we've all dealt with COVID in different ways. I did think it was quite interesting if maybe you two swapped your hobbies. If suddenly, Louise, you became a golfer, and we got Craig to be a horse rider. I thought that might be a sort of good post-lockdown challenge if you're up for it.
Adam, in my youth, I did ride a horse, and that's why I've ended up with a face like this, a face for radio. Thanks very much.
How just very quickly, because we're a bit over time, how have you two coped? Louise first. How do you sort of just have to get away and put your phone down on a Saturday? How do you sort of, what's the word, decompress?
Oh, interesting. So, you know, again, many of you know, lockdown has been interesting for me because I'm also a foster mom, something I promote from a personal level. So 11 weeks lockdown with a foster child and then into the 7-8 weeks holiday has been an interesting journey. And more so because we're all remote working, and at least now blending remote working with going back into the office. I don't put my phone down, and I so need to. Adam, you should not ask me that question because you know better than I that I do not put the phone down, and it's not good, it's not healthy, and it's not right, and I promise to get better.
Right, we've all heard that now. Craig, what about you?
I've found it sometimes really difficult to manage at a distance. I've got a team of people that I'm expecting to be available because business doesn't stop and people need information. So, you know, doing that remotely has been difficult. And I've also got a few members of my team that, you know, live alone, and they've been really urging me to reopen the office so that they can get, you know, some of that social interaction that is the bread and butter of the office environment, and the brainstorming that ensues around that. So it's been a real dilemma for me, you know, being safe and reopening the office for those that need that space. And we have done that. We've just reopened only a week or so ago. Every other day the office is manned. So for me, I do have a round of golf. I try to get once a week in. It's not improved my handicap at all, and switch off that way. But like Louise, the phone is never off. And the sleepless nights, you know, we worry passionately about Coventry and Warwickshire's economy. We want this place to be the best economy in the UK. And by being collaborative, this is the biggest crisis since World War II. We can't afford to be territorial. So by working together, I'm sure we can reset and recover faster than any other area in the UK.
I think we'd all second that. I worked fairly early on, worked out that it was better for my physical health to cycle into work and sit in a room with an empty fridge than sit at home with a
Yeah.
Look, can I just, I think on behalf of all champions who are on this call, all champions, we really do, please pass on our thanks to your teams, who we know how hard they've worked, and to your two individual cases, the dedication you've shown. It really, really is appreciated. So both of you, thank you very much indeed. Craig and Louise, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You will have seen there's been a raft of headlines about this in recent weeks. The Coventry Warwickshire LEP attracted government funding from the Getting Building Fund to invest in shovel-ready projects across our area. The CWLEP team, led by Paula Dees, along with input from all our local councils, certainly, as I know from my email trail, burnt the midnight oil to put the bid together for our area within a very, very short and testing timeframe. Their hard work paid off, with Coventry being awarded £12 million as part of a £66 million allocation to the West Midlands Combined Authority, and Warwickshire was also given £8.1 million. That means projects such as the new business hub for micro and SMEs in the north of our area in Nuneaton, through to the Riverside Green Corridor scheme in the south, with projects such as St Mary's Hall and developments at the Rico Arena and VLR in the middle, will now progress, which is all the help we need when we're trying to reset the economy. We have a new champion who's come on board this month, and you will see, I think, their logo on the screen, the Centre for New Midlands. There they go. Thank you very much indeed for them for coming on board. I know that Chris Smith, one of the guys behind that, is a regular attendee. Our next meeting is on September the 16th. The venue is the same, your office, your living room, your shed, your garage, whatever. Please do keep your eyes open for the speaker announcements, which will be coming out in the next couple of weeks, but please do put that in your diary. Hopefully more people will be back from holiday by then. Thank you very much for joining today. Thank you for being part of what is a very powerful network, which is really fueled by cooperation, as you saw there, the likes of with Craig and with Louise. And please, as I always say on this fantastic evening and for the rest of the week, please tell somebody something positive about Coventry Warwickshire today. Thank you very much for joining us.